Hey guys, it's Glaze Day. Sorry I couldn't be there, but I have enough information on this video to get you guys through it. And then I have my awesome sister-in-law who's there covering for me. So I'm going to talk about everything we need to know about glazing. Once your piece is finished, you're just going to do a couple of things to check and make sure that your piece is done. And then you're going to leave your piece on your shelf where your name is. And when I come in for during the week, the pieces will get fired. I will email you as soon as they are done so that you can come and pick them up. So just to go over a couple of things, when you have your piece, you're going to need a couple of things in front of you. So the first thing that you're going to need is a banding wheel. So it's just a small wheel that can turn around with your piece on it that we're going to use while we're glazing at the table. We will be at the table and we will not be at the wheel. So you can just take a seat there. You will have a banding wheel in front of you, and then you're also going to need some wax resist that's in containers. So you're going to grab that, and then you're going to grab yourself one of the wax brushes that's in the vase that says wax only. We want to make sure that we're using these brushes because they already have wax residue on them. The other brushes are glaze brushes, and we don't want to get wax residue and glaze together, or else then it just makes a mess of the glaze and it'll create a problem for your piece. So once you have those things, you would grab your piece, and what we're going to be focusing on is the bottom of our piece. So the bottom of your piece needs to have wax resist on it. The reason why is because we need to make sure that no glaze gets to the bottom of our piece. If our piece is sitting on the kiln shelf and there's any glaze that's touching where it touches the shelf, then it's going to get stuck to the shelf and it won't come off. But if we wax resist it and then we clean any glaze that may be there at the end of us glazing, then when we have a clean bottom and we put it on the shelf, it'll just easily come up. So that's what we're going for. That's the goal. So right now I'm going to show you guys. It's very, very simple. You're just going to grab one of the wax brushes. You're going to open the wax container. It's okay that there's like some bumps that are in there. It's just wax that's been drying. So you do also want to make sure that you're closing it after you're finished with it, because the longer it's open, the faster the wax dries. It's okay if it dries though. I can reheat it to get it liquid again. But we're just doing a light layer of wax on the bottom of our piece just to coat the entire area. So yes, even though I have a foot that's cut in, I am still going to wax the entire area of this piece. Now, you do not need to do heavy coats and you do not need to do multiple coats. It's one coat everywhere just until you've got wax on all of the areas. So I am almost done with this. There's just a couple bits on the side that I'm going to glaze. Then I'm going to cover with wax. And so now this is done. So now the whole bottom of the piece, kind of hard to see, but the whole bottom of the piece is now covered with wax. So once I have the bottom of the piece covered with wax, and what I'm doing right now is just trying to clean the wax lines. You don't necessarily have to do this. Wax burns off in the kiln. Doesn't really matter. I'm just very OCD and I don't like seeing lines. But once you're finished with this, you're going to leave your piece on the banding wheel. So I'm going to move this from the banding wheel. Leave it on the banding wheel upside down to let it dry. So it doesn't take that long to dry. And while we are waiting for it to dry, I will go over the glaze colors. So at this point right now, you can get your banding wheels, you can get your pieces, you can get your wax resistant, you can get your wax brushes, and you can coat the wax on the bottom of your piece. And Flo, you can hit pause right now, and then they can do that, and then we'll watch the next part of this. So the next part is going to be talking about the glaze. So now your piece should be dry. Once it's dry, you're able to turn it upside down and you can put it back on the banding wheel. I'm just gonna put it down so we can see. And you can leave it there so we can talk about our glazes. So this is my glaze sample wheel, which you guys are going to be able to see in person. I'm just going to go over it on the video right now. So there's two different types of glazes that I want to talk about. All of the glazes have different colors, but there's two different types of glazes that show up in different ways. So first we have our celadons, which most of them are here. There's a couple more that are on here that are not side by side, but the celadons are all see-through. When you're looking on the color wheel, you can see that you can actually see the white clay body underneath the color. That is because this is a translucent glaze, so it will show through your piece. So if you had created texture and you kind of wanted that to show, I would choose a celadon because the celadon will show it. However, there's also the potter's choice, which are some of the colors that are here and these. And potter's choice are opaque, so they will not show the color of the body. It will cover the white clay completely, and it will be whatever color that is. Now, some of these colors, when you're looking at them, you'll see that they break different colors in different areas. That is just what the glaze does. It's not a glaze combo. It's just what the glaze does by itself. So number 4 is purple and breaks a brownish orange in certain areas. Number 12 is a light blue that breaks brownish orange or a deeper brown in different areas. You also have number 5, which really likes texture. So when it sits in a certain place, it turns a bluish green. When it's on a straight piece, it's going to be kind of a translucent green. So you want to just pay attention to, if you're using something like number 5, that you're thinking about where it's going to sit and what you're actually looking for. Because if you're trying to go for that color that only shows up when it sits somewhere and your piece is completely straight, you're not really going to get too much of that color. Not saying you won't get a lot of it or you won't get some of it. You will get some, it just won't be a lot. So just think about things like that. You also have the option of, if you have an inside to your piece and an outside to your piece, that you can glaze one. So you can glaze the inside and then you can choose to glaze the outside. So if I had wanted to, I could have put one color in here and then I could have put a different color out here. But I'm choosing to have this all be one color. So I'm just doing all of it one color. I like to go simple. It's not really difficult to do 2 colors. The only thing that you need to think about is if the color is coming from the inside, do you want it to be on the rim? Or if the color is coming from the outside, do you want that to be on the rim? Because the colors cannot meet at the rim unless you're trying to make a different color. Most of these colors don't really play well with each other. Some of them do, but also it's kind of a wild card to put something there and not know what it will be. Not necessarily a wild card in it being dangerous to your piece. It's more just like, if you know you want this to be clear and you know you want this to be blue, and then you kind of mix them at the top, I can't necessarily guarantee what's going to happen at the top. That's all I'm saying. But if you want to mix two colors at the top, you totally can. So now we're going to go over, you saw the glaze wheel, you picked your color, how now to get your color, and then how to paint it on. So we're going to act as if my piece wasn't already glazed and I was just looking at the wheel and I chose 12, which is what my piece is. It already has glaze on it. So I chose 12, I want 12. And the reason I know it's 12 is because when I looked at the color, I looked underneath to get the color that it is. So for all of these that are on the outside, they have a number underneath so that you can look to see what it is. When you're looking for that glaze now, on the glaze shelf, you will see that there is a name for each glaze and there is a number for each glaze. So that number lets you know that it is the same color that you're finding on the wheel that you want for that bottle. So that's how you're going to find what you're looking for. So another choice, let's say I was going for number 9. I would go to the glaze shelf. I would look for number 9. I would see that that's wasabi. I would see that it says it's a celadon, so I know that that's the one that I was looking for. Let's say that I wanted to go for number 13. So then I see that it's 13. I go to the glaze shelf. I look for the number. I see that that's Blue Midnight. I see that it's a potter's choice. So I know that it's not going to be see-through and that that's the color that I want. So the reason why I want you guys to pick from here and not necessarily the bottle is because if you look at this bottle in person, along with my sample wheel, you will see that the color varies. So I don't want you guys going with the colors that are here because it's not going to come out exactly like this. It's more likely to come out what you see on here because this is the clay that we use. This is the temperature I fire to, and this is most likely what your piece is going to be. I created the grooves for if you have texture in your piece and the smooth parts for if you don't have texture in your piece. So this is a better option of if you don't know what color you're choosing than looking at the bottles, because the bottles won't necessarily be true to how it will actually fire. So you've picked your color, you have your glaze. We're now going to go over how to actually apply that glaze. So Flo, if you want to pause it here, if everybody hasn't picked their color, you can pick your color now. Again, remember that you can pick 2 different colors if you're doing it inside and outside, or you can pick 1 color and just keep it simple. You have 2 pieces, so both of those pieces can get glazed different colors, and then there you go. That's your 2 colors. So I will let you guys pause it, and I will be back with you when you have your glaze and it's in front of you. So now you have your glaze and everybody's ready to glaze. So I have my 12 in front of me because that's what I'm using for my bowl. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is explain that glaze is not paint. Glaze and paint are somewhat similar, but they have a lot of different ways in which they work. The first thing is that this is chemicals and minerals that are all mixed together that create this color that you see when it is heated up in the kiln. So the first thing is that the color of the glaze is not the color that you will get at the end of the piece. So this light blue is what I want, but on my bowl, it looks red. So I'm not going to see this light blue until my piece is fired. There's a couple of glazes here that do not look like the color of their glaze. That is fine because that's just them in their natural state. they need to be heated up to change their state to become a different color. So as long as you understand that, you're not freaking out about the fact that your blue bowl looks red, then we'll move on to the next part. The next part is that because there's chemicals that make up this glaze, the chemicals will not just go on by themselves because they are dry. So most of the chemicals take up this much space in the bottle, and then the rest of this is just water. But the problem is that when this glaze is just sitting and no one is using it, most of the chemicals are sitting down here, and all of this is just colored water that really isn't mixed with chemicals. So once you grab your glaze, you need to shake it and hear the sound of the glaze moving. If you do not hear the glaze moving, you want to shake it even harder, or you want to make sure that it's not empty. If it is empty, there should be extra glaze for almost every single glaze that's here. I don't think that I'm running out of any glazes at this point. I have not done inventory, but I'm pretty sure that every glaze is here and should be full. But you want to shake this up really well for a good 30 to 45 seconds. The reason why is you want to get all of that glaze, and some of the glaze is stubborn. Some of the materials are stubborn and they will stay to the bottom of the bottle for a while. So you just want to make sure that you can get them mixed in. So once we've shaken it for a good while, then we want to open it. The one thing I will say is that some of these bottles are definitely hard to open. What ends up happening is the glaze dries around the edge, and then it's really hard to twist off. If you are having problem opening your glaze, one of the things that you can do is just run it under some really hot water and then try twisting it off. At that point, it should probably come off because water will get under there and make sure that all the glaze that was holding it tight comes off. So now we're going to open the glaze, and we are going to be painting directly from the bottle. So you're going to have your bottle and you're going to pick your paintbrush. So all of these paintbrushes that I have here are paintbrushes that you can use for glaze. Now there are some different ones, but one thing to understand is that any of these brushes can be used for glaze. It really just is a personal preference on whether you use something like a fan brush or whether you use something that has a tip like this. So it's really just, if you know painting and you know angles and you know what you're doing, go for what you want to go for. If you don't know any of that, I don't either. And I just honestly pick whatever seems like it makes more sense. So like if I'm doing something big like this bowl, I will use the fan brush for most of it just to coat it. And then when I'm getting closer to the edge, I might use like one of these straight edge brushes, or I might use something small just to get the fine edge and not really like go over. But for the most part, I just go with the most surface, and then when I'm getting to like intricate detail, then I'm going for like the smallest brush that makes sense for what I'm trying to do. So right now I'm going to work with the fan brush just because this is a pretty big bowl and I just want to get the glaze everywhere. So I already have 2 coats on my piece. So I'm going to show you how to coat a piece, but the main thing is when you're coating a piece, you need to put 3 coats on. So 3 coats should look like you're putting one on and it becomes the color of the glaze and dries. When it's in this dry state, you are now going to put on the next coat, and then you're going to wait until it's in this dry state again. But the funny thing is, the second time it's going to take longer. The reason why, the first time it soaks into the piece, the second time it's kind of soaking into the piece and kind of sitting on the piece. But the third time you do this, Now that glaze is sitting on the outside of the piece and not necessarily soaking in anymore. So when I do glaze this time, it's actually going to stay wet so that you can see the difference between it wet and it dry, because this is my third coat. So if I had did my first coat, within seconds, it would be this color. If I did the second coat, a couple of seconds, some of it would be this color and some of it would be that color. But since this is my third coat, for the most part, it's going to stay wet because this has already been coated 2 times. But what you want to do, whether you're doing your first or second or third coat, is you want to just get everything painted almost as quickly as possible and as evenly as possible. It's okay if you miss some fine edges because you can go back over it. But what you want to do is just quickly coat everything. Paint strokes don't really matter. For something like this bowl, I'm going like this to do the edges, and then in the middle, I just swirl to get it everywhere. And so, as you can see, I coated that pretty quick. The edges are not so cleaned up, but I'm actually going to work on that right now. But the plan was just to literally get glaze everywhere. And now I'm going to go to the edge and clean up the edge. And all I'm trying to do is make sure that the glaze is even. Good. And then once I have it even everywhere, now if you're working with a Celadon, you do want to be careful, not necessarily with your brush strokes, but how the glaze dries. If it starts to dry and some areas look like they have streaks, you just want to go over the streaks until they kind of blend into the piece. So you're just brushing over the streaks until everything is kind of smooth and even. So that it just looks uniform and it doesn't look like there's a thick part in one side and then the other part is not as thick. So it's just coating everywhere and then going over the brush strokes to just make sure it doesn't look streaky. But once it's like that, it's going to start drying. So this is the third glaze and it's already drying on the inside. Now, once I've done the inside, I can turn it over on my banding wheel and now I can work on the outside. So just so you guys can see what it looks like, I'll hold it in my hand, but you would normally just have this on the table. And then what you can do is coat one area, then you would spin the wheel to get to the next part. And this would be kind of helpful in just getting everything coated and then also kind of knowing where you started and where you stopped. So again, remember, you can go back over any spots that you missed, but the goal is to just get the glaze everywhere and then do touch-ups after the glaze is everywhere. So I'm just going to keep working on this and keep turning it as if I would be turning it if I had it on the table. And I'm just trying to get back to the part where I started. And once I get back there, then I'm going to do any touch-ups that are necessary. Keep turning this. I'm almost at the point where it's connected. So this was where I started. This was where I started, and it's already starting to dry. And I've come all the way back around full circle. So now I'm just going to finish up there, and then I'll put this down so I can do this part. I'm going to spin it around and look for any streaks. And if I see any streaks that are in the piece, I'm going to brush those flat so that everything is flat and even on the piece. And there's no thick drops or uneven parts. So it should all look nice and even on the piece. So like I said, this was my third glaze, so I don't need to put any more glaze. I'm going to touch up the top here with a smaller brush, just because this brush would be too wide to try to get there and not end up getting glaze on the bottom of my piece. But I do want to show you guys when you're finished and if you potentially have glaze on the bottom of your piece, what you're going to do. So 1 second. All right, so when you're finished glazing your piece, you just want to make sure that you wash your brush with soap and water to make sure that you get all of the glaze off of it, and it can go back into the vase just like that. It's going to dry, but I don't want them to get lost or get mixed with anything else. So as soon as you're finished with it, you can just clean it, put it back in the vase, and then whether you're glazing another piece or you're using a different color, then you can just go from there. So now let's say that my piece is done. I'm finished with everything, and I just want to make sure that I'm finished with it before I leave. So this is like, I've glazed both of my pieces. They both have 3 glazes on them. The glaze is dry. I'm now done. What do I do? First thing is, I just remembered this. When you're glazing here and you finish, as soon as you possibly can, take your piece and turn it upside down. The reason why, or turn it right side up. The reason why is because if you have glaze on your banding wheel and you leave this like that, it's going to dry to the banding wheel, which is not terrible, but then it's going to be hard to come off. And when you look on the rim of your piece, it's going to be rough, and the glaze will pretty much like peel off. So again, once you're finished glazing here and you can touch it even just in some areas, you just want to flip it over, and you can finish letting it dry, but you just want to finish letting it dry right side up. Now this may be how you get glaze on the bottom of your piece, or you might have just gotten it for other reasons. It's okay, because remember, we waxed the bottom. So all you have to do when your piece is finished and you're done and you don't have anything else to do is take a sponge and get it wet. It needs to be wet, but not soaking wet. So there should not be any water coming out of it. This is very important, because if you have water that soaks onto your piece, again, not necessarily that it will mess the piece up, but it's just going to cause it to be wet, and then it's going to take longer to dry. So we don't want any water to be in the sponge that can go onto the piece. So just wet but not soaking. Then you're going to hold it to the bottom of your piece, apply a little bit of pressure, and slide it against that bottom instead of wiping it multiple times. The reason we don't want to do that is because the glaze gets on the sponge, and if you keep wiping it, the glaze will go on, come off, go on, come off, because you're just literally applying and reapplying it back on. So you're just holding, apply pressure, wipe. Get a clean part of the sponge now. Hold, apply pressure, wipe. Hold, apply pressure, wipe. So now the bottom of my piece is clean and ready for glazing. Once the bottom of your piece is clean, you can put it back on the shelf near your name, and you are almost done. Or you're done if you've done this next part that I'm going to talk about already. So when you're finished with your glaze, you just want to make sure that you close it. Couple of things to look out for. Just pay attention to the fact that all of the glazes are going to have glaze in their tops. So that's why it becomes hard to put it back on. But you just want to be careful that when you put it on, you close it properly and that it's not crooked. Some of them, it's really hard to tell if it's crooked. And if you do put it on crooked and then it tilts, it's going to start leaking. So you just want to make sure that you close it properly and just check to make sure it's not leaking. The other thing is, if you finish with a glaze and you're going to use another glaze, maybe somebody used it before you. Maybe somebody in another class used it before you. Please just check it before you shake it. I've already had 3 spills that have happened. 1 was my fault, 2 were other students, but it's normal in the game of glaze, so I won't be mad. It's honestly, it's very, very common to just forget, but I just want to remind you to please check the bottle before you shake the bottle, because that glaze will get everywhere. Now, yes, glaze is washable. It does come off. But it is an irritant for some people. It's an irritant for me. I cannot have it on my skin or else I will start to itch. So I am just really careful when I'm around glaze. But you just want to make sure that when opening a bottle, when shaking the bottle, when closing the bottle, you're just constantly checking and making sure the seal is good. Now, some of these bottles, they're fine and they don't have issues, but some of them, and I'll show you one of my most troublesome ones, they tend to spill. They also tend to be very hard to open. So again, that's where I'm saying put it under the warm water. Make sure that you can twist it off pretty simply. If you cannot twist it off that easily, then you're going to want to put it under the warm water so you can. And then you also just want to make sure that you close it and you check it. Because one like this, which I actually won't leave this one out because this is a pretty dangerous glaze to use. This is seaweed. It does a lot of things that would be too much to explain. And also it is a pretty advanced glaze. But you just want to also make sure that if you use any of the glazes, you're just checking to make sure it doesn't spill. So yeah, once you finish glazing your pieces, once you've closed all the bottles, you made sure nothing's going to spill, you've cleaned up the banding wheels. To clean up the banding wheels, very easy, sponge and water. That's it. So once you've cleaned the banding wheels, once you've washed all of the paint brushes with soap and water, the wax brushes are back in the wax vase and the glaze brushes are in the glaze vase, and your pieces are on the shelf near your name, you are done. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. Your pieces are going to look beautiful. I know it because all my glazes are amazing, but also because your pieces were wonderful and nobody had a bad piece. And I'm not just saying that because I'm your teacher. But yeah, so enjoy the rest of your day. I thank you for coming out and trying out this class. I hope to see all of you guys again. And I will email you as soon as your pieces are ready so that you can pick them up. All right, take care. Bye.